The session today is all about post-campaign analysis, interpretation, and evaluation. In simple terms, turning information into intelligence that you can use for decision-making and prioritization in your marketing activities. The difference between this session and maybe previous sessions on a similar kind of topic is that we're going to explore how AI-enabled insights can be really supercharging the decision making that you're doing from the data and information that you collect. So we're looking here to really turn performance data through campaigns, projects, and marketing activity into actionable recommendations for your continuous improvement personally, as a team, and as an organizational brand. So what we're looking to focus in here on is to really enhance your ability to analyze dashboards, spot to simple case, what worked and what didn't, but also then make evidence-based recommendations to colleagues, to your management for future activity. This is key. That phrase evidence-based is everything in successful marketing. So that's where we're going to really hone in on as we go through this session. And this stuff really does matter. What gets measured gets improved, says Peter Drucker. And we know that one. It's a very often quoted phrase from Peter Drucker there. And it's all about analyzing and identifying success, pinpointing failures, and creating what we might term a learning loop. So building a really good habit of, if you do something, measure and watch what happened, and then do something differently next time. Because there is this opportunity to continuously improve everything. That's the real key here. According to the CIM, post-campaign analysis is a critical step in demonstrating accountability and value. So not only are your projects and campaigns going to perform better, you're going to be perceived as a more credible and competent marketer as well. So it's a win-win, really, is what we're talking about here as we look at analysis, interpretation, and evaluation. And we'll see this really being a pivotal point, I guess you could say, at every single stage of a campaign life cycle. So whether it's the initial planning and you're drawing from data from previous campaigns, for example, the execution, where as you actually roll out a campaign, you're constantly watching those key performance indicators to see how you're doing, and then you maybe adapt and adjust actually as you're doing the campaign. The overall measurement of what happened, that successful dashboard that I've just mentioned, evaluation, and of course that is now where AI can come in and really support you to evaluate and get deep into, even forensically into the information to really evaluate what's happening. And then, of course, the end of the campaign life cycle is continuous improvement. What will I do differently next time as a result of what I've found? Now, we can see that there's a four-stage evaluation framework here. As you start to kind of pull back from that as a project or a campaign life cycle, you start to kind of think, well, okay, there are different things that are happening, but actually there's a consistency of what I need to do at each of those stages to be able to do this stuff. So we're looking at collecting, cleaning, interpreting, and recommending. So at collect, it's gathering data from all channels, everything that you've done, gathering as much data as you can. The clean is checking for accuracy, removing duplicates, any errors, any kind of data that you think, well, it's a little bit tenuous, it wasn't really as strong as the rest of the stuff we've collected. And then making sure everything then is robust is really what we're after there. Interpret is analyzing metrics and then comparing those to those key performance indicators that I've just mentioned. So knowing what indicators are really important because they're the ones that are showing your real progress. It's not kind of just the stuff you pick out of the air. It's stuff that's really making a difference. And then analyzing those metrics. And then recommend is translating those insights into next steps. And that's why right at the outset, I said the habit that you're building here is information into intelligence. So the information is just data, so nobody really understands what that means. So your task is to translate that into insights that then give you the intelligence for moving things on and doing things better next time. So traditional metrics that we would have been collecting over the years, this is kind of, very, very sort of traditional in the true sense of the word, are things like reach and impressions, click-through rates, conversion rates, cost per lead, cost per acquisition, ROI, and return on advertising spend. I mean, there's lots of stuff that we will see in the textbooks, and it's been there for a long, long time. That's the kind of traditional stuff. And I'm not saying that's not good. I'm not saying that those things aren't still important, but we've moved on to AI enhanced metrics. And these are the things where you can actually take stuff to the next level when you're doing this. So for this, it might be predictive conversion likelihood. And there are tools you can use to actually predict the likelihood of a conversion of a certain individual who's coming through the customer journey. Peak AI or Accio are good tools for exploration of that. Sentiment analysis from social media. Now, this is one that I guess a number of us have kind of started to play with. Sentiment analysis is, how does my campaign make people feel? Not just did they actually act and did they behave differently, but how do they actually feel as a result of going through these activities and seeing what we do? So Brandwatch and Talkwalker, good platforms and tools to explore there. Another AI enhanced metric could be engagement quality scores. And again, with things like that, we're looking at probably the latest version of Google Analytics or Hotjar to see where the quality of the conversion or the engagement is happening on potentially a website page, for example. So you might have created a landing page on the website. Whereabouts is the engagement happening? Is it just above the line? So is it literally on that first screen, or do they have to actually scroll down to get the higher value information? And what could you do differently next time? And contribution analysis for multi-touch attribution. In other words, what we're looking at here is seeing and exploring with AI enhanced metrics what is happening throughout the entirety of the journey, particularly when a campaign could be multi-channel, multi-media, if you like, and then multi-behavioral change that you're trying to inspire. And the sources of campaign data sort of traditionally will be things like paid media dashboards. So if you're doing the paid media that we've been talking about, then things like Google Ads or Meta Ads Manager will give you some great data. The insights you can get off of these platforms are very, very powerful. If it's owned analytics, so your website, for example, then obviously GA4, Google Analytics 4, and anything that you're using as an email platform, be that MailChimp or HubSpot, others are available. Many, many others are available. Those are your kind of owned analytics and your own sources of data. Earned media or earned sources of data will be social listening tools, any PR tracking, and or where you appear in other people's networks or on other people's websites, for example. So that's earned media, where the quality of what you've done has actually earned you the right to appear somewhere else. And you could argue, well, that's kind of in line with advocacy as well. CRM data, this is really important because campaigns should never work in isolation. So ensuring that they're actually joined together with other sources of information, so Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever CRM system that you have, making sure that your campaign data is being collected along with CRM data. In other words, having established this campaign, having executed it, having measured it, what then happened? Because if it was just, oh, we created some brand awareness, well, that's not good enough. That brand awareness needs to translate into actual people's behavior change or sales and or conversions in however you describe them. So linking with your CRM data, which gives you the customer relationship management data of what happened to the people who were targeted, is absolutely key. So think a little bit more broadly, maybe. And of course, all of these sources of data can come together as you're starting to push them then through your favorite AI tool to see if it can spot patterns. We'll come on to that a little bit later. And then as you're doing that, what you need to be doing in this data collection is data cleansing or data cleaning. And in practice, that kind of thing is like removing duplicate leads, for example. Somebody might have clicked twice, or somebody might have bought two tickets who actually only wanted one, but there was a kind of a missed transaction there. And standardizing name conventions, so campaign codes, and the like, you know, making sure that if you're talking about something here, it's consistent across different campaigns. So you don't just suddenly start talking about something different and then kind of lose that traceability across older campaigns, because you might be looking for some kind of trend analysis, for example. Checking for missing values. Again, a lot of these systems that we've talked about will flag up if there is missing data and can actually remove those particular records if there's too much missing. So, for example, in MailChimp, if you've only got an email address but you don't have first name and second name, if you've got a very high quality campaign going out that requires people to be individually addressed in the campaign, that record in basic sense could be removed, because you wouldn't want dear and then a blank space and then the article. That would be worse than actually not sending it at all. So it's those kinds of things. So be checking for missing values across your data. And of course, cross check with finance and sales teams, making sure that actually you're targeting in the campaign the right people, the right individuals, because then what you can make sure is that actually what you're reporting is meaningful to these other teams as well. And particularly, my eyes are drawn here to the sales team words there, because of course, the likelihood is from the campaign, the follow up potentially is a salesperson. So that could be a visit, a meeting, or a call. And so you need to make sure the accuracy there is really, really strong. And what we're also focusing in on here is reading dashboards effectively. And by making sure that you're actually putting the right stuff in the dashboard, you know, actually not vanity metrics. Oh, look how many followers we've got. Oh, look how many people visited our website. That is so meaningless at a surface level to most people in the organization, apart from maybe the web designer who's going on a little ego trip. You know, I'm joking, but you know what I mean is that really focusing your metrics, the stuff you're reporting in your dashboards, to campaign objectives, the real objectives, not just the growth of followers and brand awareness, that woolly phrase, but actually stuff that makes a difference to the performance of the business. And also comparing results to benchmarks. I mean, there are a lot of industry averages available now. And again, you can use your AI. You could use something like Perplexity to give you some deep researched data around the average performance of a campaign of this nature in this industry. A lot of the benchmarking of data is publicly available, but it's very hard as a human to find it. So use your AI to go deep into those things. And then, of course, your dashboard can also segment by audience, by channel, and by creative. So, not a single dashboard. I mean, I've said reading dashboards, plural, effectively, really gives us this reminder that you probably need more than one dashboard. Because if you're telling a story to the business, to colleagues, to your agency around a single audience, and that could be a very different campaign style or approach to another one, then you probably are looking at a different dashboard or a different report. So the nuance of this is really important. You know, this is definitely not a one size fits all approach. So start to really pause and reflect on, what am I actually trying to achieve here? What am I trying to report? What would I like to know in a deep sense? And I'll use this word again, forensic. What forensically would I like to know about how my campaign's doing, or my activity, or my project? Because if I want to get really under the cover and understand this, then I've got to go deep into segmenting. I've got to go deep into the accuracy here. And I've actually got to be thinking from a business perspective, not just a marketing angle. And of course, there will be many common mistakes that happen when you're starting to look at that data on your dashboard that you've collected and cleansed. And you think, look, I'm following all the right kind of patterns and all the right rules, and I think I'm doing the right thing. But actually, what I'm not really kind of sure what I'm seeing. And a lot of the time, this will be because as mere humans, we do misinterpret stuff. You know, we ignore qualitative context. You know, we just look at the numbers. We don't look at the customer sentiment behind them. So we might have made the sales, but everybody's unhappy. Or, you know, we might have got some good growth there, but actually it's not sustainable because we didn't really get the message right. Or we hit the short-term figures, but look, we've actually cannibalized our long-term sales. So don't overemphasize short-term spikes. Don't think that's success. You need to be looking at medium to longer term trends to ensure you've got success. And don't confuse correlation with causation. And what that means is actually, if you can see there's a pattern between if we do this, we get that, That doesn't mean that was the sole reason you got that outcome. It could have also been something else. We call this multivariate analysis. And again, this is where AI can really, really support you because you won't see it. You're human. There's no shame in knowing that you're human. I mean, you can do A/B analysis. Look at two things, change one thing, and you can see the impact. But if you do multivariate analysis, where you see two things have moved there, but are not sure which one actually resulted in that change, of course you wouldn't. But AI can spot it. It can do that deep analysis for you. So that's key. So as we start to make interpretations here, this is really where we're starting to build up to the point where we're going to bring AI into the mix here, is that we need some kind of interpretation guide. So much as we had the cleansing guide and the life cycle guide and the checklist before, this is our step-by-step interpretation guide. So the things that you can do here as you start to interpret your data and your dashboards is you can compare actuals to targets. Simple, obviously, because that is what most of us would want to do. But you can also identify best and worst performing assets. So you kind of get a sort of a priority list of actually, if I could only do three things next campaign, these are my top three. I've got to carry these forward with me. And I probably wouldn't do those things at the bottom of the list again. That could be useful. Look for anomalies and outliers. That's also really interesting. Don't just look at the big numbers and the big stuff. Sometimes the little details that are really on the outskirts there, where one or two things happened, they could also be, very interestingly, indicators of what you might do differently next time. So it is basically about paying attention to everything, really. Check engagement quality, not just quantity. Now, I've said this kind of in different ways a number of times already here. This is about quality, not just quantity. And again, that's where the sentiment analysis comes in. So you can look at the objective numbers, the data, but also look at the subjective. We often see this when we're talking to our accountancy colleagues or the finance team. They will be looking very much at the black and white objective. Look, if we cut this cost, this is actually more profitable. And you'll be looking at it from cut this cost means you can't do that, which means the number overall is going to be lower next time. And so it's probably the correct answer is somewhere in between. Yes, rationalizing what you do. Yes, reducing a cost to something will make things more profitable, but only in the longer term if you're cutting the right things. So this is all about collaboration and working and co-creating a good outcome. So, summarizing your interpretation there with 3 to 5 key takeaways: subjective and objective, quality over quantity, not always over quantity completely, but most of the time quality will win out. And then comparing to the actual, or comparing the actuals to the targets that you had. That is absolutely key. And then, of course, what you can do then is start to sort of bring other tools into play here. So if you were, for example, to be looking at a SWOT analysis of your campaign, strengths, what exceeded expectations? That's an interesting one to explore. Weaknesses, what were the underperforming elements? Opportunities, what improvements could I make for my next campaign? And threats, what are the external factors, things like competitor actions or market shifts that did probably skew some of the performance and some of the insights and data we captured. So you can see how this can overlay and play out in lots of other, and probably for lots of colleagues, lots of familiar other theories and networks and frameworks too. So it's useful really to start to see how you can play this out. And it will play out. It'll play out right the way through your customer journey, or as some people call it, sales funnel. At the top, it'll be reach and awareness metrics. These are things that you really want to interpret and evaluate. Are you reaching the right people at the right scale? Is the awareness actually there, or do you just think you've created some awareness? Can you prove it? Remember, evidence is everything. In the middle of the funnel, as you go down towards the conversion stage, engagement and consideration. Because it's all very well making the noise and adding to the chaos that is digital footprint at the moment for most brands. But actually, if you don't get engagement, and then that engagement doesn't then result in real consideration of your product or service, then you've just made noise for the noise, the sake of noise. So actually, consideration and engagement are the really, really key things at the middle stage of the funnel. And at the bottom of the funnel, conversion and retention, making sure that actually the idea that you had that this campaign is going to drive some sales actually did happen and that actually it did lead to conversion. And again, that's where things like your CRM integration needs to come into play. And the retention one's also interesting because that begs the question, and then what happened next? So, if over time you can be collecting and analyzing and interpreting and evaluating data and information from a variety of similar kinds of campaigns, you can actually then see that, well, actually, look, we've improved things over time. And actually, we have retained the similar customers who are coming through the funnel that we've created. They are coming through the customer journey. We are keeping them happy. And wow, we're actually growing this thing. So there's lots of good different reasons, but they're all kind of contributing really to the whole kind of broader picture here of just continuous improvement throughout the journey. That's ultimately really what we're talking about here. We can dress it up into all these big fancy words and bring in data and information, but ultimately this is what we're trying to do is just make our customer journeys and our sales funnels just better. And contribution analysis comes into play when we're thinking about this because it's understanding the relative impact of each channel, the relative contribution that certain parts or certain activities or certain types of media are playing in the choices that we've made. So, for example, paid search might contribute to 40% of conversions, but actually it might only be 20% of spend. So you're needing to look at these little almost bundles, if you like, of information and data and think, okay, if we do paid ads, yeah, well, we can see that, we've got an upturn in sales, but actually it's for the lower value items that we're trying to sell here. That's interesting. What do we learn? And so it's about being curious and almost saying it in that kind of tone of voice to yourself, the way I just did there, which is like, there's something going on here. Oh, that's curious. And having that curiosity, that kind of innate feeling that everything, no matter whether it's doing incredibly well as a performance, everything can be improved. There's always stuff. You will never hit 100%. And that is also the beauty of this process, is that there is always something you can do more. Those little, and I often find myself talking about them, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, but incremental gains, that is really what this is all about. And that's key. And where are those going to come from? Because I think, the more we talk about this, the more it is very, very clear that we can't, as humans, probably see much of this stuff ourselves. So we need to be bringing now in our AI, be it Copilot, be it Notion AI, be it ChatGPT, or otherwise. Summarize dashboards automatically using these tools, and you will get faster insights. The lovely thing about AI now is that you can run scenario testing. What if I had changed spend between this channel and this channel if I'm doing some paid ads? Or what if I didn't actually use that particular channel at all? I'd replaced it with this one. What is the likely scenario that would have played out? And this is just so, so interesting. You can do this kind of wargaming, if you like, in advance of a campaign, or you can look at the end of the campaign and say, look, this is how it played out. What would you do differently next time, ChatGPT? What would you recommend the top 3 things I could do next time? And can you give me evidence as to why that's the case? Because I need to justify this to my line manager. You've got this all seeing, all knowing friend, colleague, assistant sat next to you. So use it. AI can really help to answer those questions. And it will be about the deep, deep level of detail of things like this sentiment and analysis. Evaluating thousands of campaign comments for positive, negative, or neutral tone, for example. There are tools out there. Again, lots of these are now becoming AI powered. So the level of detail and context you're going to get from them is so much stronger than it was 2, 3 years ago. Monkey Learn, Lexalytics, Brandwatch, again, more examples of tools that you can go away and experiment with. And they will help you to get deeper and deeper into the results and the kind of, as I say, the nuances of what you're seeing behind the data that you've collected. And that is the key thing here. What we're doing is we're looking behind the numbers. We're looking at actually what do these numbers truly mean? They're not just numbers. If you're still resulting in kind of just reporting numbers and data to your business, I would challenge, well, that's either because you didn't realize that this stuff was available and now you do, so wow, or you did know it was there, but you're just too lazy to do it. Come on, let's be honest. Some of us sometimes we are lazy. I'm looking in the mirror, as I always do when I challenge this, and say, actually, am I being brutally honest? Do I always do this? No, I don't, because reporting numbers is easy. But the analysis and interpretation, information, remember, into intelligence, that's the key. The business can understand intelligence, but it won't understand the numbers. So let's step up here. And of course, by doing that, we can do predictive modeling. In campaign evaluation, we can use tools like Beacon AI, RapidMiner, etc., to predict, for example, which segments will respond best to future campaigns, or which channels, as a result of the current trends in those channels, or the usage of a particular audience of this particular social network and the trend of how that's moving, the kind of content or the kind of media that they are now consuming, which it could be different to last month or last year. By doing this predictive modeling, we're going to get from our data and our insights better and better and better. And what we're ultimately trying to do here as we do this interpretation and evaluation is turn numbers into narrative using the so what logic, metric, meaning, recommendation. So taking a metric into what does it mean, into a recommendation, is this habit we're trying to build. So that is something which I would, absolutely encourage you to do. If your click rate, for example, was high, but the conversions were low, recommendation is improve the landing page user experience. So there's a metric, there's a meaning, and there's your recommendation. It's a very simple little example, but you'll get the drift once you start to practice this. The metric, the meaning, the recommendation. Three little steps that will turn everything you're doing into okay, better, best. Each time you do it, you will just get better and better, incrementally stronger in what you do. And so when it comes to kind of sharing this stuff, doing things rather than by numbers, but doing it with narratives, doing it with storytelling, your post-campaign reports are going to get so much stronger rather than just saying, this is what we did. We were great. Here's all the upsides. We don't really want to tell you about what didn't work. Actually, we're going to say, there was quite a bit that didn't work. Okay, it didn't work too badly, but these things didn't really work, and we have learned from these. So next time, watch out, guys, because this is what's coming. So the sections now of your new AI-enabled campaign report could be something like objectives and benchmarks, data and findings, your interpretation, the recommendations, and the lessons learned. And the format being a one-page exec summary with, of course, detailed appendices if you need them, so that if somebody is curious about, oh, I'd like to learn a little bit more about this, this is interesting because now you're telling me stories, not just giving me numbers. I want to actually have a look at these numbers because I kind of understand what they mean a bit more now. That's the kind of reaction that you'll both be encouraging, but I would confidently say you will get. It's interesting. So presenting insights to no matter what stakeholder you're talking about, be it a sales colleague, be it your finance team, your board, your senior management team, or a colleague or an agency, briefing, obviously an agency with this kind of stuff gives them so much more power to come back with a great, great creative campaign next time. So use visuals, charts, infographics over raw tables. Don't present the numbers. Nobody gets it. Nobody cares. Nobody understands. In fact, do we really anyway? So it is about storytelling. Focus on outcomes, not inputs. Nobody really cares what you did. They want to know what the outcome from what you did was, and provide actionable next steps, not just data. People want the confidence that you've got this. And of course, you have got this because you've got the evidence. You've got this incredible AI assistant working next to you to go deep into the data, to prioritize what you're going to do better next time. So you have got this. And those actionable next steps are going to be key in the confidence building and the kind of examples that you'll then bring to bear when you say, look, we told you we're going to improve it next time. And here, look, we did. But next time we've got another improvement we're going to try. And so your credibility and marketing's credibility in the business will go sky high. Little example for you here. I often find myself looking at kind of retail industries because they are just so driven by all of this stuff, and it is so, so important in retail here. So, if an objective, for example, was drive sales via a promotional email, the findings could be we got high open rates, but we got low conversions. So, a lot of people opened the email, but very few people actually converted. So, the interpretation when you dive deep is that the subject lines are strong, but the landing pages were weak. There's the data and the evidence we've captured. So the recommendation is we're going to optimize the customer experience. We're going to test product page calls to action. So you've got then, if you were to repeat and replicate that over everything you're doing, down to the level of each individual channel, you've then got an improvement checklist. You've got yourself a little project campaign, um, remedial action list that you can work through before you send the next time. Continuous improvement, actually working properly. And then your post-campaign evaluation checklist really comes together. It really kind of falls into place with your AI supporting you. And the questions then on the checklist that I would say, and there's kind of five really, is were objectives clear and measurable? So were you actually aiming for the right thing? Did metrics align to those objectives? So when you gathered data, were you actually focused on the real stuff that was actually helping to show that you did or didn't achieve your goals? Were anomalies identified and explained? Did you really understand what happened with AI? Hopefully, now you will. Any recommendations evidence based? Can you back that storytelling up with the numbers? The numbers don't go away, they're still there, but it's about how you're positioning them versus the storytelling that's key. And the final checklist point is there a learning loop in the next campaign? That one is key. Once you're building this habit, you will not want to go back. Once you see how people react and how you see the success and the trend of your campaigns is on a positive, you will want to do this every time. So, building in that learning loop is a great final habit of our 5-step post campaign evaluation checklist. And so, if you want some tools, if you want some stuff to kind of help you on your way, I've said, choose your favorite AI. You might be using Copilot or Gemini or Claude or GPT, whichever one you like. They are all going to be able to help you along the track here. Me personally, it's ChatGPT, but you may well have a different choice there, and that's fine. Google Analytics 4 will help you with funnel and attribution. Looker Studio is worth checking out for dashboards. HubSpot CRM, even at a demo level, is great for seeing how you can set up conversion tracking. Brandwatch is a big, big favorite for many marketers and PR specialists for social sentiment. And Accio or Beacon AI is a good one to test out on a trial account for some predictive insights. Get a bundle of those tools working together. Get your AI aligned with that, and you will be supercharged, superpower with the afterburners on in terms of your analysis, interpretation, and evaluation. So, some final reflections on this in this journey to just getting better, more sound, continuous improvement in your campaigns and projects is that campaign analysis is about learning, not judging. So, keep an open mind. By combining traditional metrics with AI enabled tools, you can deliver clear, evidence backed recommendations. And as W. Edwards Denning said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So build those habits, try those checklists, start to put this into play at the end of your next campaign to build for the start of the following one. And you'll be in a really strong position to really understand this post-campaign analysis, interpretation, and evaluation.